Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Stage is a series on this channel where games are played in the Commander Tavern for your entertainment. This episode of The Stage is a double header. It's two back-to-back 3DH games between a Mazirek Kraul Death Priest stax deck piloted by yours truly, a Morophon Spider tribal deck piloted by Josué, and a Krenko Mob Boss Goblin tribal deck piloted by Stephan. If you like any of the cards played throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. Other ways you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. Higher tier patrons get access to a VIP section of my Discord server, as well as early access to scheduled videos on YouTube. You can find a link to that down in the description too. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. Alright, let's get back to the episode. I keep an opening hand of Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, Elves of Deep Shadow, Grave Titan, Karn's Bastion, Woodland Cemetery, Caustic Caterpillar, and Wave of Vitriol. Josué keeps an opening hand of Command Tower, Rugged Highlands, Skysnare Spider, Underworld Connections, Deadly Recluse, an Island, and a Forest. Stephan keeps an opening hand of Urza's Incubator, Goblin Instigator, Soul Ring, Red Elemental Blast, Dark Steel Ingot, and 2 Mountains. I win the die roll and start us off. I draw a card, and then play an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. I pass. Josué draws a card, plays the Rugged Highlands, then passes. Stephan draws a card. He drops a mountain and taps it to cast Soul Ring. He then passes. I draw a card. I play an untapped Woodland Cemetery. I tap it to cast an Elves of Deep Shadow, and then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Command Tower. He casts a Deadly Recluse and passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He plays a mountain. No surprise to anyone, he gets his turn 2 Krenko. He then passes. Already sweating, I untap, then draw a card. I cast Caustic Caterpillar. I then play Gaia's Cradle. I then tap out to cast Meren of Clan Neltoth. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He drops a swamp. He casts Obelisk Spider. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He drops a mountain. He then casts Urza's Incubator, naming Goblin. He then casts Goblin Instigator, creating a Goblin token. He then casts Goblin Matron, looking for Skirk Fire Marshal. Not waiting for an opponent's end step, he activates Krenko, creating 4 Goblin tokens. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I play Yavimaya Hollow. I then cast my own commander. I activate Caustic Caterpillar, targeting Urza's Incubator, targeting Mazirek and Meren. I resolve Mazirek's ability first, giving all my creatures a +1/+1 counter. Then Meren resolves and I get an experience counter. At the beginning of my end step, Meren triggers, returning Caustic Caterpillar to the battlefield. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Tranquil Cove. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He plays a mountain. He casts Goblin Warchief. He then casts Darksteel Ingot. He activates Krenko, creating 9 more Goblin tokens. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I play Karn's Bastion. I cast Doubling Season. I then cast Armorcraft Judge, drawing 3 cards. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Forest. He then casts Thran Dynamo. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He casts Skirk Fire Marshal. He activates Krenko, creating 19 more goblin tokens. He enters combat, sending 10 damage Josué's way. He blocks the 2 non-token goblins with his spiders, taking 8 combat damage. For the lulz, Stephan decides to end the game there and then, now for the shiggles. He activates Skirk Fire Marshal. Then, with his ability on the stack, he holds priority and does it again. He continues holding priority and responds to the ability on the stack and does it again. He essentially activates Skirk Fire Marshal 5 times. By the time the 4th activation resolves, the entire table goes down in a fiery mess. This is what I love about Commander. Stephan could have used Goblin Matron to find Goblin Recruiter, but instead he went for Skirk Fire Marshal in order to end the game in a draw just because he could. He had enough goblins to finish off his opponents in maybe one more turn, but he decided to end the game that way. He wanted to send a message. Kudos to him, it was a lot of fun and definitely an interesting play from my perspective. Josué was a bit behind in his mana acceleration, but unfortunately he lost before being able to cast Morophon the next turn and really go off. My deck ran smoothly, but unfortunately too slow that game against Krenko, which is an unforgivingly fast deck. Had I drawn to anything to wipe the board, even a Golgari Charm to at least give all creatures -1/-1, I could have helped turn the tide against Stephan's impressive board state. Even then, I'm happy with the outcome since it was a fun match, especially watching Stephan's Goblin Horde grow exponentially so quickly. Alright, on to game 2. I keep an opening hand of World Shaper, Woodfall Primus, Heroic Intervention, Smallpox, Soul Ring, a Swamp, and a Forest. Josué keeps an opening hand of Deadly Recluse, Twin Silk Spider, Penumbra Spider, Ember Weaver, Temple of a Bandit, and a Mountain. Stephan keeps an opening hand of Thran Dynamo, Sensation Gorger, Siege Gang Commander, Goblin Warchief, Fist of Flame, and 2 Mountains. I once more win the die roll and start us off. I draw a card and then play a Forest. I tap it to cast Soul Ring. I then pass. Josué draws a card, then plays a Temple of a Bandit. He scries 1, then passes. Stephan draws a card, then plays a Mountain. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I play a Swamp, then cast World Shaper. I pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Mountain, then casts Deadly Recluse. He passes. Stephan draws a card. He plays a Mountain. He casts Fist of Flame, targeting Josué's Spider in order to draw a card. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I miss a land drop, but I'm able to cast Rayhan, Last of the Abzan. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Temple of Malady. He scries 1. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He drops a Mountain and casts Goblin Warchief. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I play Karn's Bastion. I enter combat, sending Rayhan Stephan's way. He doesn't block and takes 3 damage. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Forest. He casts Penumbra Spider. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He drops a Mountain and casts Krenko, immediately activating him and creating 2 Goblin tokens. He then passes. At the end of his turn, I activate Karn's Bastion and proliferate. I untap, then draw a card. I tap out to cast my commander as well. I then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Temple of Triumph. He scries 1. He casts Twin Silk Spider, creating a spider token. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He plays a Bloodstained Mire. He casts Siege Gang Commander, creating 3 more Goblin tokens. He then activates Krenko, creating 8 more Goblin tokens for a total of 13 Goblin tokens. He sacrifices Bloodstained Mire, triggering Mazirek. I put a +1/+1 counter on each of my creatures while Stephan fetches for a basic Mountain. He then enters combat, sending 13 Goblin tokens my way. I block 3 and take 10 damage. He then passes. I untap, then draw a card. I think a while, and then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He casts Rot Widow Pact. He then passes. Stephan untaps, then draws a card. He plays a mountain. He casts Thran Dynamo. He then casts Sensation Gorger. He activates Krenko, creating 14 goblin tokens for a total of 24 goblin tokens. He enters combat, swinging them all at me. In response, I cast Inspiring Call, drawing 3 cards. Unfortunately, I draw into 3 lands. I block 3 tokens and take 21 combat damage. I untap, then draw a card. Spoiler, another land. I play a Verdant Catacombs. I activate it, fetching for a Bayou. It triggers Mazirek, putting another +1/+1 counter on all of my creatures. Knowing I'm going to die next turn, I swim with everything. World Shaper triggers, milling myself for 3. Stephan blocks Rayhan. In response, I activate Karn's Bastion, proliferating my +1/+1 counters. He takes 11 damage, 5 of which are commandered. I discard down to 7 cards and then pass. Josué untaps, then draws a card. He casts Ember Weaver. He then passes. Stephan untaps. At the beginning of his upkeep, Sensation Gorger triggers. He reveals a goblin. Everyone discards their hands and draws 4 cards. He then draws his card for turn. He casts Goblin Sharpshooter. He then casts Goblin Rabblemaster. He casts Legion Loyalist. He then activates Krenko, creating 27 Goblin tokens. He then enters combat, triggering Goblin Rabblemaster, creating yet another Goblin token for a total of 49 Goblin tokens. He sends 20 Goblin tokens my way, and the rest to Josué. Goblin Rabblemaster and Legion Loyalist trigger. Stephan's creatures gain trample and first strike. The Rabblemaster becomes a 55-2. Neither Josué nor I have any responses, and Stephan takes the win. Seeking retribution of his own for the Goblin beatdown I gave him in the very first episode of the stage, Stephan also shows just how powerful Krenko is. Unfortunately, Josué's deck didn't draw into any ramp or responses for both games shown here. He was able to get some defenses up, but it wasn't enough against Stephan's wave of goblins. I once more had a good game going and a great start, but kept drawing into lands instead of responses. Unable to deal with getting smacked around by dozens of goblins turn by turn, my doom was inevitable. We played a couple of games that day, but I decided on uploading these 2 for today's episode. They were quite fun and we had a blast playing them. I hope you had fun watching it. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I also want to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. It also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Stage on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and happy playing.